Week 2 of Pride Week. This week I want to talk about two female poets. So first up is Sappho. She is the origin of the word sapphic and lesbian because she was born on Lesbos. She was a lyric poet in ancient Greece. Not much is known about her. We believe she was born around 630 BCE to a wealthy family. She had 3 brothers. She and her family were exiled to Sicily sometime between 604 and 595, and she possibly died around 570. She may or may not have had a husband. The earliest records of her husband came long after her death, and his name is recorded as Kerkylas of Andros. Many people think this is made up because it roughly translates as Small Dick of Man Island. She also may or may not have had a daughter named Cleis. Some people think that Cleis was actually a younger lover. There's also a story about her killing herself because a young ferryman she loved did not love her back. But many modern historians think that is just completely made up. In ancient Greek, she was considered a very important poet. After her death, she earned the nicknames the Poetess, which is a reference to Homer, who was the poet. She was also referred to as the 10th Muse. She wrote about 10,000 lines of poetry. Unfortunately, only about 650 still remain. Most of it is in fragments. There's one complete poem and one mostly complete poem. Her sexuality is still hotly debated. We look to her poetry for proof. Of course, that raises the question of how much of her poetry is meant to be autobiographical. One poem that names her explicitly as Sappho is the only complete poem, Ode to Aphrodite, in which she prays to Aphrodite to help her get back a woman she loves. Another is known as Fragment 94. So that begins, I simply want to be dead. Weeping she left me with many tears and said this, oh, how badly things have turned out for us. Sappho, I swear, against my will I leave you. Stanza 8 reads, on a soft bed, delicate, you would let loose your longing. So that seems to imply a woman she has sexual relationship has left her for some reason against her will. Anyways, next up is Emily Dickinson. She is not only one of the most important American female poets, she's considered one of the most important American poets, period. She was born December 10th, 1830. She was the second of 3 children. Her family valued education, including for the girls, and she was lucky enough to live in a time that girls could go to school and get an education. As a teenager, she attended Amherst Academy, where she met Susan Huntington Gilbert. It is more or less accepted that she and Susan were in a romantic relationship. After Amherst Academy, she went to Mount Holyoke in 1847, but she left after a year. We don't know why. Some people think her father wanted her back, she was homesick, she was sick, or she did not like the religious fervor at the school. In the 1850s, she started to withdraw from society. In 1856, her close friend and probable girlfriend Susan married her brother, Austin. In the late 50s, she started to collect her poetry into manuscripts. And by the early 60s, she had basically completely withdrawn from society. She spent the early 60s writing a lot of poetry. Around this time, she also developed the reputation as the Lady in White. She rarely left the house. Sometimes she would only speak to people through a door. When she was seen, she was usually wearing all white. We don't know why she secluded herself. One theory is she had agoraphobia, but we can never know. She eventually died at age 55 in 1866. During her life, she only published 10 poems, but after she died, her sister Lavinia found hundreds of poems, over 1,700 poems. These poems were basically split between her brother's mistress, Mabel Loomis Todd, and Sussan. Mabel published the first collection of poems. It was heavily edited to change the punctuation. Mabel also very much downplayed the relationship between Emily and Sussan. Her poetry is notable for its use of slant rhymes and unusual punctuation. I don't really want to read the whole poem, but in a poem that begins, "One sister have I in our house," I will include a link. The last stanza is, "I spilt the dew, but took the morn. I chose this single star. From out the wide night's numbers, Sue forevermore." That's everything for today. See ya!